Hi guys, so in this video, James OBrien talks about the confusion surrounding the messaging coming from Downing Street. So let's hear what he had to say.
What's today's instruction from Downing Street? Well, if you were the Daily Mail, you would have carried out an audit of more than 70 firms in order to find dozens who do not have any immediate plans for employees to return to offices within 2 months. And I think most sensible people would go, oh, okay, so what? They've made a calculation based upon their commercial activity, that their business is not going to be affected negatively by continuing to keep people at home, therefore they're not going to risk their workforce's health. And that's the end of the conversation. Unless you're doing the bidding of Downing Street, in which case you run a headline saying, giants who have let fear keep UK PLC locked down. So what's the fear? We've got 50,000 dead people. I'd quite like not to become one of them, or people I love to be added to that number. That's an irrational fear now, is it? Okay, so talk me through why I can't go to Spain on holiday without being banged up at home for a fortnight when I land, even if I've come in from an island that's got a lower risk of catching coronavirus than I have in my own hometown. Yeah, you see, you can't, can you? This is what happens. This is what our friend in Newport Pagnell was talking about. You have to ask the questions. And if you do ask the questions, you come up with this answer. Who is in charge of deciding where you work from? Your employer? Dominic Cummings? A Daily Mail columnist, or you? And the answer, if you're lucky, will be a combination of A and D. It will be a consultation or a conversation between you and your employer. If you're unlucky, it will be all A and they're ordering you back to work, which is clearly going to be the case for people in the retail and service sectors, what you might call customer-facing roles. If you're lucky, but not quite as lucky as people that get to have a conversation with their employers about what would suit them best, then you'll be working from home for the foreseeable future. Why? Because what the Daily Mail call fear, you and I would call risk. And the company is managing risk in a way that balances out wealth, we're back here again, and health. So they have calculated that the risk to their workforce's health is small enough to absorb any hit that might be made to the company's wealth. Or, even more likely, I think, looking at some of the numbers, companies are actually doing fine during this pandemic with people working from home. Therefore, until a proper all clear has been sounded, until we get a Jacinta Ardern type of leader in this country and actually manage to rid our shores of coronavirus, then you will be able to continue working from home. So, for reasons I genuinely don't fully grasp, this is some examples provided by the Daily Mail of what companies will be doing. And the weirdest thing, of course, is that they're supposed to be free marketeers, aren't they, these people? Isn't that what they call themselves all the time when they're not claiming to be libertarians? They're free marketeers. You must let businesses do whatever they want. The bonfire of regulations. Brexit was built on freeing businesses from red tape and regulations. Obviously, they didn't understand that they were going to introduce way more red tape and regulation. But if you could call it an ideology, the ideology would be it's a free market. Let businesses decide what to do and they will essentially regulate themselves. So how come all of the businesses that are freely deciding what they want to do and essentially regulating themselves have come in from a kicking from the best-selling newspaper in the country that would ordinarily be absolutely on the side of bosses and absolutely opposed to any workforce that ever dared to unionise or protect its workforce? Seriously, this is a tricky one for me. What's going on? The Daily Mail would normally climb a mountain on its knees to suck up to big business. They're the ones that pay for the advertising, after all. And, of course, they are passionately opposed to workplace representation. That's why people who toe these ludicrous lines end up attacking teachers or doctors or firefighters, because once you have put unions in the crosshairs, nobody's safe. No workforce is safe. People have to put their hands up, adults, to ask permission to go to the toilet. And yet today, here they are, back to work. Now it's time to get tough. Why? I am at work, you would say. If you work for Microsoft, staff will not be required to return until at least November. They are at work. So what's going on here for the second time today? Why are they saying back to work to people who are still working?
I truly wish people would stop supporting and reading and giving money to the Daily Mail, because it's clear now that it's just a megaphone, a mouthpiece for the Conservative Party. When big business and the Tories are aligned, then the likes of the Daily Mail will praise big business. They will criticise unions no end, and they will continually describe unions as impeding and blocking, and the enemy, ironically, of the workers themselves. But as soon as big business steps out of line, then the hammer comes down. I've been continually trying to reinforce this point. The Conservative Party don't give a crap about you. They don't care about you as an individual. They only care about what you can produce for their donors, what you can produce for the economy. Your value as a citizen is zero, but your value as a worker is what you can produce on that day. Recently, Greater Manchester has gone into lockdown, so-called lockdown. But in reality, it's not a lockdown because the restrictions are on families, individuals meeting with other individuals. But the lockdown doesn't affect business owners, doesn't affect workplaces, doesn't affect pubs or restaurants. So how is that a lockdown? You can see how this is focused on the public. It's not focused on business. It makes perfect sense to restrict gatherings of people, for example in homes. But why is it not restricting gatherings in business, gatherings in restaurants? You can see here that business is being protected and citizens are being told not to mingle. But if the government were serious about dealing with this pandemic in, for example, Manchester, they would implement a full lockdown, but they're not. And once again, responsibility is offloaded from the government onto members of the public. But in this case, members of the public meeting with their family members, not members of the public going into workplaces, going into shops, spending money. You can see here clearly how the economy is prioritized. Citizens are secondary. On a side for a moment, I just can't imagine how this would have played out both in the media and in Parliament, with Boris Johnson as head of the opposition and Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister, how this would have played out and the vitriol that would have been thrown at the government for actually implementing a lockdown. I think Jeremy Corbyn would have dealt with this much better than Boris Johnson. I think anyone would have done a better job than Boris Johnson. Almost 50,000 have died. Companies are reopening. People are being sent back to work. However, larger companies realize that they can take a financial hit and they would prefer their employees not to come into work, to stay at home. But let's just pause for a moment and think about the working class. People who don't have the choice, don't have the ability, don't have the privilege to stay at home and work from home. What do? They have to go into the workplace. They have to expose themselves once again. Larger companies are also much more prudent. They don't want to have cases brought into their offices. They don't want to have that bad publicity. They don't want to be responsible for a lockdown in the local area or their premises. So once again, just to conclude on this, Boris Johnson and his government care more about protecting the economy, protecting businesses, than actually protecting citizens. That is why this lockdown that's taking place in Manchester is demanding that citizens follow the rules, but businesses are exempt. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun. If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.